All right, Emily, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you both this
Yay.
evening, this morning,
Yeah.
this afternoon.
Right. Um, as you know, we like to start off the show with our new question, which is what's something that's life is teaching you right now?
I like this new question. And if you had asked me this yesterday, my answer would have been different, which I guess
Mm.
is kind of the point. Um, but something that life is teaching me right now is that I still have and may always have, but have another layer of work to do around money stuff,
Mm.
and specifically receiving abundance.
Mm.
And when I sat with this question, I thought of you, Eva, because I know that you talk about money and have done a lot of work around that. So I was like, this is perfect going in.
Well, actually, I would even say
our
like
conversation.
do you mean Kylie? Because that's like Kylie's zone of genius, the money stuff.
I've
Yeah.
heard you talk about
Yeah.
it, but I know you both talk about it. Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, so so yeah, that's what life is. I don't know if there's a lesson around it yet. The
Mhm.
lesson is just there's another layer of work to do here.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask, is that in relation? Is that coming up because and have any connection to pregnancy and this next chapter of your life, or was it
Yeah.
something completely different?
No, 100%, because I've always been very independent and very if I want something, I can go after it. I can do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what this phase is bringing up for me is desiring and also the requirement to take some time off
Mm-hmm.
and to really depend on in the most beautiful sense of the word other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's real vulnerability there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I've thought a lot about like birth and like the actual process of birth and how that will be very vulnerable, but this is like another layer
Yeah.
that is being brought into focus right now.
Yeah. Well, okay, so this is partly why I wanted to have you on the show, like specifically right now, because I think how many weeks pregnant are you?
At the time of this recording, 30 weeks.
30 weeks. Okay. So offline, you and I had an interesting conversation, or just like throwing around ideas about how it would be fun to talk about the connection between birth and also birthing a business. And like, we'll jump into that. But I just think, and this is really what my thoughts are. It's like, so I've never had kids. Kyley, you have two kids, and Emily, you're like right in the middle. So I thought it'd be cool to have like three people in different phases of their life sharing about that. But I also feel like there's always something like, to me, if I were pregnant, I'd want to document everything that I was doing when I was pregnant, because I feel like it's such an interesting time, like a fertile time. And so I almost wonder like if this podcast would be interesting for you to go back and listen to like 20 years down the line, and you'll be like, oh my God, like I was in such a transitionary phase in my life. And so, yeah, I kind of just want to talk about all of that, all of
Can
the
I
things
add something to what
that.
you just said, Eva, too?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's wild about, in my experience, pregnancy with my first kid, a little less so with my second, but is like you spend all this time and energy preparing, but you have no fucking clue what you're preparing for, right?
Mhm.
Like it wasn't that I had any clue with what a second kid would mean or what she would be like, but I knew that I had no fucking clue, right? But like I think it's just fascinating, like even when you were talking about documenting, and I was thinking about like the things that I documented, and maybe this is just a me, but I just think you can't actually know. You can't know what your kid will be like, what your personal needs will be like. You just can't know. And so you spend this beautiful period like preparing and also your preparations are hilariously irrelevant the second the kid's born, you know, and there's no other way to go about it, at least that I know of. So yeah, I think it would be beautiful. I think it would be I just like what you're pointing out of like the ways in which this is this like pause before. I want to say pause before the storm, and that sounds bad. Like I don't mean it.
No,
I
understand. It's like the pause before the birth, before the transformation, before like you're totally. I'm very aware that I don't know what's coming. As much as I'm prepping and reading and researching and doing my mindfulness practices and getting in touch with my body and my baby, I'm also like, I have no idea. And it's interesting because specifically, Eva, what we had talked about was, this like kind of comparing birthing a child to birthing a business, which is a metaphor and I think like a way of going about business that I was introduced to many years ago and now teach. And I'm just seeing so many like new things in the moment as I'm going through this actual process of pregnancy. And I think it's the same. It's probably very different, but in some ways it's very much the same of like when you birth a business or when you launch a business, your whole identity shifts and no one can prepare you really for what comes next, what comes after. And something super interesting that has come up for me recently is how there's a similar vibration to the feeling that I'm feeling now, in that some people that used to be very close and used to like, I feel like I used to resonate with, it's no longer, there's something that's missing there. There's like a part of me that they don't understand. And I felt exactly that same way, or they don't fully see when I was leaving the corporate world and stepping into launching or birthing my own business. So yeah, that's been something interesting that's come up. And I'm curious too, Kyley, for you, having gone through this process, not once, but twice, if that was something that you observed as well, whether with your babies or with your work.
You mean specifically the sort of like the shifting of relationships that happens? Yeah. I mean, it's what I'm thinking about is just how married birth and death are, right? Like,
yes,
because that's what you're really speaking to, is like this new you is being born. I mean, that's one of the things that I feel really strongly about, that I wish we made more cultural space for, is like, there's a new baby, but there's also there's two new humans, right? If it's a single birth, it's the mom who is entirely a new being as much as there's this new baby. And I think we have a lot of cultural conversations around like going back, like getting your body back and feeling back to normal. And like that and I think I feel this way just as much with each of my kids, like the person who went in to give birth and the person who left. Like the person who went in died, right? And this new person emerged. And so yes, lots of death around birth, whether it's like whatever it is that's being birthed. And I think it's totally not uncommon that relationships end up as part of that. Like really, and really beautifully, right? Sometimes it can be hard and uncomfortable, but sometimes it's just this really organic, like falling away that it can't help but happen. Yeah. Have you been feeling the molting process throughout?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I feel it's been accelerated now that we're like in this final trimester.
Yeah.
It almost feels like being sucked into like a spiral or a drain or something that there's no resisting it. There's no resisting it or doing it on my own pace. Like it's happening.
I love that you're already feeling that, because I think that's the energy of like labor, right? Like
I know, I'm like, am I going into labor early?
I mean, that just feels like such a beautiful like that, to me, that just speaks to your own awareness of your energy and the energy that you're experiencing. Because I mean, I think a lot of us go into labor and we're like, whoa, slow this down. Right. And that's part of what makes it's a complicated experience, but because yeah, it just happens. Right. And it's like, all right, here we go, buckle up.
Yeah.
Yeah. This whole conversation is giving me all the feels, because I've talked about this on the podcast before about my, I don't know if I would call it, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd call it anxiety or resistance, but like just even that
ambivalence. Is that what you're saying?
No, there's actually a reaction here, like an anxious reaction. The idea of like the old me dying. I mean, that has to be part of the process. You have to be able to let go. But I'm like, but I don't want my old me to die. I like my old me. It just sounds like such a
yes.
But that is the journey, right? Like the longer you hold on, the more you suffer. And also, by the way, that's coming from a very like scarcity mindset. What I've also seen time and time again is actually, it's simply just an evolution in which you change, but if you can go with the flow, there's the opportunity to become an even more expanded version of yourself.
Yeah. And I think because we don't acknowledge that this old you has died, it makes I mean, I have spoken very openly on the podcast that with both of my kids, I had pretty intense postpartum anxiety and depression. And part of that is because there was no space for like you're mourning without knowing what you're mourning, right? Because there wasn't space, again, at least for me. And I've heard other women say something similar, like there wasn't space, and I did not give myself space for the fact that like a version of me had died, and I had to like learn this new baby, but I also just had to learn this new human who was Kyley, who like kind of looked the same, but even that wasn't totally true. And again, because I feel like I'm like really saying all these like dark and scary things.
You're not scaring me at all.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And also, Kyley, I know that you love motherhood, so like I don't get that vibe either.
Yeah. But also like, I mean, all of my I'm resistant always to using the word like spiritual awakening, but like these huge waves of like spiritual expansion happened in that phase of like an old me has died. I'm figuring out the new me. Like, what does it mean to be a mother to this new child? Like that, both of those moments, the birth of both my kids, is probably like the two singular events that most cracked me open to the universe, and to myself. So yeah, it's a good death.
Well, and something when I was interviewing midwives right after we found out we were pregnant, I had a really great conversation with a midwife who talked about the grief associated with becoming pregnant and becoming a mother, giving birth. And I feel very fortunate that I do feel like I've had a lot of folks in my awareness that have spoken really honestly about these things. And I've been like learning about birth for the last few years. So it wasn't a new thing, but I so appreciated that she brought that up right in our initial conversation. Yeah. And it is such a juxtaposition of like, you're celebrating this new being, and what so many people have said, oh, this is the happiest time in your life, whether that's about new motherhood or pregnancy. And there's more than just joy that it exists there. There's a lot of grief, really.
Oh, I think I'm so happy that you're saying that, because that gives permission for people to feel like, because I think the story is like, oh, well, if I'm not happy all the time, like I'm bad, or there's something wrong with me.
Especially being this period and like motherhood and having a baby. But so I'm feeling that like death is like happening. And Eva, I think you said something like, well, now it's just popped out of my head. So, but something around like that we can resist that. And that is where we get the suffering. just through that resistance.
I also feel like for me, when I am either not enjoying motherhood or like feeling really racked by like the more complicated kind of guilt and stuff around motherhood, it's always because the should story is so loud, right? Like, I mean, that is so loud and like culturally baked in around motherhood. And so I think this moment of, oh my God, I should be so happy. And like, how dare I be fucking terrified that I'm about to have a baby? My whole like I can't go gallivanting around the city anymore. Like, like I used to, like, when I got pregnant with Desi, I literally lived in a 500 square foot apartment in Cambridge and like rode my bike to like listen to music at bars with my friends all the time, right? Like that life instantly was over. And so the complexity of the joy and the grief, the grief shows up, and I think it's so tempting for us to kind of like reject it because we think it means we're a bad mother, right? Like, don't I want this? But all of that stuff. And I feel like one of the lessons motherhood is teaching me again and again and again is like, there is no should. There is no should. There is no should. And so like, how do you feel in this moment? That's how you feel, whole and complete. And like, and I'm really, I think, I'm really good about doing that in all facets of my life. And motherhood is a complicated place for that because I want to be the best possible mother for my kids, right? And so when I have moments of being like, I'm bored, I don't want to play this game with them, right? Then I feel the guilt and the should shows up. So I think, like, again, like the fact that you have a team already who can mirror to you that this guilt and this joy get to coexist and always coexist just feels like, that just feels like a really gorgeous gift.
Yeah, I agree. And I've always, like, for the longest time, I said that entrepreneurship is a huge spiritual journey. I mean, we know life is the spiritual journey, everything is, but I've always seen in myself and in folks that I work with that stepping out there and putting yourself out there or putting your work out there, whatever that is, brings up so much. And I know that parenting is going to do the same, and motherhood is, I mean, it already has. So,
well, which is why I wanted to talk about this concept of like, even like the birth and business, even the language of birthing your business, I think is relevant, because the first time I heard someone say that, I was like, oh, that is not how I started my business. I didn't feel like, I mean, I did, because ultimately you're literally creating something and it's coming out of you. But I was coming at it from such a, oh God, like my transformation has been pretty huge in terms of like, I was very much that like, I mean, there's nothing, do you guys know who Marie Forleo is?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with her. I like Marie Forleo. Like, I think she's cool, but I'm thinking of other examples, just this very much like hustle, like in like more like bro marketing type.
Well, it's a very like masculine, feminine, like, it's a very masculine approach to business.
Yes, exactly. And
there's a strategy and there's steps, and you follow the steps, and like it's a math, linear. It's a formula.
Exactly.
And you just solve the formula, slot in A and B appropriately, and like it will work out.
Yeah, but even like the energy of it, it's like I see this all the time, but it's like the YouTube energy of like, hey, what's up, guys? Like, like follow my this and like that vibe. 3 steps.
Oh my gosh. I really hope that if we are putting this on YouTube right now,
I hope that goes on YouTube.
That goes on YouTube, and we like add some of those like visual effects of like pow pow to the finger pointing you were just doing.
Yeah, exactly. But you know that vibe that I'm talking. It's like it's so funny. But and then when I heard someone just use the phrase, the idea of like birthing your business to begin with, I was like, wow, that's someone who started off that way. I was like, wow, that is a totally intentionally, I think, different way way of being and moving forward in your business. And I guess I was wondering if you could just even talk about that a little bit.
Pulling even a step back, can you just kind of break down this metaphor for us? Because I would love to I have a picture that I'm painting, but I would rather hear yours.
Yeah, totally. And I think the like over big picture is exactly what Eva said of there are many different ways to bring businesses into this world, just like there are many different ways to birth. And I'm not inherently going to say one is wrong, right, good, bad, better, worse. But I was introduced to this concept of birthing a business many years ago. And the metaphor in this one takes a more feminine approach to business, tuning into intuition and feelings, like that's in the actual maybe running or execution of the business. But there's so much more than that when we start to think of our business or our passion projects or the programs that we're launching, one as separate entities. They are something that ultimately will be separate from us. They are of us, but they are not us. And that they can go through this gestation process. And the gestation process is not just vision and manifest. It starts with conception or even preconception. And as people listening have probably heard, especially in this day and age, we're seeing more and more that even that conception process takes time. And so in a business sense, that means that for the idea to come in and for it to actually, get to a place where it can take root, where it could grow into something that is its own being, can take time. For some people, it happens right away. For some people, it takes time. So I think even just starting with that's a very different perspective than many of us in the business world. I went to business school, but then I also left corporate America to work in the health and wellness space and like entrepreneurial coaching space. And a lot of what we see, even if it has like and I'm using these terms obviously in the archetypal sense, a very feminine exterior, the colors, the feel, the images, it's still executed in a very masculine way, which is more linear, which is see and execute or manifest. So that's like I guess the beginning. And then we can take our businesses through this like trimester theory. And I do want to give a shout out to the first place that I heard of this was in a course that I did with a company called Sister Is. And I got this book, The Business Birthing Handbook.
Cool.
And the author is Jennifer Armbrust. I think I'm saying that right. But she introduced this concept of the trimesters and how that lays well when it comes to a business. So first we have conception or preconception, and that can take time. Then there is this whole period, and we don't have to go specifically into the trimesters even right now, but there's this whole period of gestation. A baby is within you for a period of up to 10 months. And then they are birthed out into the world. And at the beginning, they need a lot of care, a lot of attention, a lot of focus. But then somewhere down the line, you're sending your kid off to school or seeing them walk down the aisle or seeing them play sports. And like maybe you even see them on TV. They are this completely separate entity. And so we can like hone into different periods, like different places in this metaphor, but taking the step back and again, seeing our businesses, seeing our creations as separate entities, something that needs us to nurture it, but is not us inherently. And that the process is absolutely not linear. although it can follow a sort of model, but whereas with human gestation, it's usually about 9-10 months. I mean, some people have a shorter gestation period. With a business, that time can really vary.
Yeah.
And giving ourselves permission to be, I think the thing that I like to offer my clients is permission to be in that gestation phase, not to have to, okay, I love yoga. I'm going to get my yoga certification and I'm going to start this business and I'm going to have my YouTube channel and my Instagram channel, my website, my retreats. And this is all going to happen in 3 months or 6 months. So yeah, giving ourselves space and also honoring that, like, just like we were saying, every birth is different. Every pregnancy is different. Every gestation of a business and birth of a business is different.
Yeah.
I have so much I want to say about this.
Go.
So much. Sorry. Like, I'm like, I'm just jump right in because I'm like putting my hands where my mouth because I almost like can't hold back. I don't even know where to start. I wish I had this model or like framework when I started my business. But I will say it's even relevant now because I think you're speaking to something that is so important. And I've alluded to this, I think maybe once or twice on the podcast, but I really want to get into it because I think this is a good place to get into it, is that I see this in myself. I've seen this in other people. It's like this idea of feeling so rushed. So I'm talking specifically urgency. And I see a lot in terms of like creation, like any kind of creative endeavor. So for us ladies, if we're in the business world, it's like, okay, this program, this launch, this workshop, this thing that I want to sell. But this can also be with like anyone who's creating anything, art, music, whatever. And I see, for me, what I was really guilty of for a very long time was like, oh, I have this idea. I have to get it out right now because I had this feeling, this fear that it was going to go away. This idea that if inspiration strikes, I have to do it now. I have to do it now. And what you were saying to me, what you were saying just now made me realize is like, I end up, so if let's just say I have a product I want to like launch. If I'm not doing like the gestation period and letting it just like organically percolate, when that child is then later older, I have a lot of cleaning up and work to do. Then there's like some weird dynamics between me and my child. And then there's like arguments and fights and we don't have a good relationship. And it's messier because I've like rushed it and I haven't let myself take my time with it. And I'm like, and I'm only realizing this within the past year. I'm like, if I just like, let it percolate when it needs and do its thing, I actually think some of like the launching and all of that would actually be like easier. And that was just so ingrained in me in this idea of like, and don't get me wrong, I believe in real creation cycles. Sometimes I will like, I can tell when it's go time. And I will literally cancel appointments, tell my partner, I'm not going to hang out with you tonight, and like take advantage of a real creation cycle. But I think that's very different from this idea of like, if I don't do it now, this idea is going to leave me and then I'm scarcity and I'm fucked.
Yeah.
Well, and you can have like I'm so glad you brought this up. And also I didn't have this framework when I started my business 7 years ago. Like I was following someone else's very linear plan. But you can have a really short creation cycle, especially whether maybe it's a really a blog post or you get a download for a program. It doesn't mean that it all has to be so stretched out. I almost see that more as like that coming through you can also be like a type of labor and delivery. Like it's been percolating up here. I recently had this idea for a mastermind and it was percolating for a while. And I think that was the gestation, even if I wasn't like, I am planning a mastermind. And then within 2 days, it like all came through me and came together. So I had that experience and I was like, oh, this is like what can be compared to like the labor and delivery.
I'm also, sorry, I didn't interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm also thinking about a couple of recent conversations I had with clients, which is the like fix it, figure it out energy. So it's like you get the like the germination of an idea, or like the desire, right? The sense of like, okay, I've been doing this kind of healing, but I can sense that something's evolving. And then we instantly go in to like kind of excavate and dig around and fix it and figure it out, as opposed to this gestation model, which is like, great, you can feel something growing, just observe it and nurture it, right? Like give yourself the sustenance you need to like grow a healthy idea. But don't put all this pressure on yourself to like, quote unquote, figure it out. Because to our point earlier about labor, like when you're in labor, you're fucking in labor. Right? And having had one labor that was induced, it's way harder when it's like manufactured, right? When it's forced, it's way harder, right? So I think like trusting and nurturing and allowing, and then showing up when, to your point, Eva, like, it's game time. Yeah. That feels really beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you guys ever have this? Do you guys ever feel this weird, okay, two fears that I have that like I've seen myself have, and why I do this is because sometimes I get, this is very much scarcity, this idea of like, oh, but if I don't do it now, someone else is going to do it. Have you guys ever thought that? And I just get this idea of like, oh, this idea is in the ether, and it's almost like the universe sent it to me somehow. It means like, it means I have to do it now. And then the other story that I had was very much from, have you guys ever read that book, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert?
Well, I was going to say that also a little bit of that is incited by that book.
Yeah.
It's like taught in that book, which I love that book. And as you're talking to it does put some urgency of like, this idea is out there. If I don't take it, and also what I hear is like, if I don't take it and capitalize on it, like share it or put it out to the world, then somebody else is going to take it and capitalize on it.
Yeah. And I mean, so for context about that book, for people who haven't read it, it's a great book about creativity and writing and mostly about creativity, right? If I'm remembering that correctly. But there's this one chapter all about how she's like, oh, she had this idea for a book, and she took her time writing it because she had all this life stuff happening. And she had all the details laid out. And then a year later, she found out that her friend was writing almost the exact same story, like same characters, like a different location, but like the details were uncanny according to her antidote. And her point being like, ideas come to you because they want to come to you. They want to be birthed through you. Like that's the thing about creation. I think creation wants to be created. I think it's like, it's excited to meet its person and be like, hey, like, do you want to work with me? Like, let's do this thing together. And that I think is a really fun idea. Similarly, maybe to this idea I've heard people say before, like your baby chooses you. And I don't know if that's true, but I think that's like a fun idea. And then, but her story was like, you need to honor the creation by doing it. And if you don't, then it's going to go find someone else. And so it's crazy how you can just read one thing and it just like forever freezes an image in your mind. Because that's literally like kind of like got under my skin. And I was like, oh my God, like if I don't do it now, someone else is going to do it.
So this is really funny because I also read that book and remember that chapter very well, but I have a really different, like it meant something different to me, which is like, oh, ideas are like infinite. Like they're just like floating in the ether. And so like one's going to come to me, and if it's mine, then I will like know it, and I'll feel, because the other part of that story that I remember was also her like kind of just like flirting with it rather than really like living in the energy of it, right? So it was like, oh, like she's like, I had the idea, but it was like still living as an outline. It wasn't really, it wasn't like she was like, I had written half of the book and then found out my friend was writing the same book, right? So my like the way I received that was like, yeah, ideas just like they just float around, and listeners will know I've got a new idea every friggin' week, so no one will be surprised. And then they're just like floating around in the air, and so And so when you get one, like the invitation is like, is this the one that I want to totally embody and own? Or is this the one that I like lovingly let go? And for me, it's this sense of like, oh, I don't have to be responsible for this idea because it will exist even if I'm not the one to execute it.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to pick which of the different ideas that show up for me every friggin' day, which are the ones that like really whole body light me up. And the rest of them, I'm going to like recognize that you were just passing by to say hi. And then you're going to go on to the next place.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how we can like read the same book and take different things away from it.
Yeah.
But because my insecurity, if you will, is that I have a million ideas, right? And like I like it's like one of the things that I am currently have been like very intentional about in my business over the last 6 months is like, okay, how do we wrangle having 8,000 ideas and also building something that's not completely exhausting and has like 20 different limbs, right? So so it's like I was looking for an answer, right? Like I read in that the answer that I needed because that spoke to the concern and fear that I already have. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm actually loving hearing this interpretation because I think, that's helping me reframe it. Like it's interesting because I'm like, you're right. That kind of was what she was saying. She wasn't fully in it. She was just flirting with the idea. And it's really interesting for me to notice now how I took that story and kind of focused on the parts that my scarcity wanted to focus on and forgot about the rest, and then created my own story. Isn't that interesting how that happens?
Yeah. Well, I do think too, though, and I mean, anything can be skewed anyway, but there is whether it was highlighted by that book, and that book is like the story that you remember, that you connect with this, there is 100% this like overwhelming sense of urgency, especially in our online coaching, wellness, 24-hour news cycle. I mean, it's not even just wellness and spirituality, it's everything. We're in this like very urgent cycle. And with Instagram and Insta TV, I think it's beautiful because it allows us to all to create more and maybe easier. Like I'm not a video editor, but I can do a reel. I'm not a photographer, but I can make a post really beautiful with like filters. But sometimes it distracts us from like what's like pulling back, like what is my real work? What am I really here? What are the business babies, the idea babies that are truly near and dear to me? And I think when we can, and I've seen this for myself because Kyley, I too am like a 100 idea person. Like, here's all the branches of my business and all the things that I can do. And the last year or so has really been about paring that down. But when we can like focus on nurturing those branches or those streams or those creations that really are aligned, that have chosen us, but we've also chosen them, not only can we find more of our own success, but then we also leave space for other people to have theirs, to have their creations, to have their expansion and abundance.
That's beautiful. Can I ask you, what would you say maybe what do you say to your clients, or just even in this conversation, like to people? And maybe I'll ask both of you. So this is, I think, an ongoing question that can always be asked and answered, is like, what do you say to someone who's I think the question has to do with like slowing down. What do you say to someone about slowing down? Because I think, especially like in business, because I think slowing down can feel scary. I mean, there's so much value in it, obviously, but essentially, how do you tell someone to slow down, and what do you say to someone about slowing down if especially if maybe they're in a place where the stakes maybe feel high, or like things are of the essence, and like, no, but I need to make this money now.
I'll let you go first.
Okay. My first response is always to encourage, because I do get this question, and it's something that I've been challenged with myself, or that I get to work on myself, is surround yourself, whether that's online or in person, as much as you can, with other people who are more fully embodying that slowdown. If your feed is all the, like, again, we love her, but if it's all the Marie Forleos or whoever that are constantly pumping out content that have these beautiful, produced videos, or even if it's your best friend, but her pace is not your pace, we're going to feel like that's normal. But if we can surround ourselves with more folks who are going slow, or be more intentional, because sometimes slow is fast. Like, that's, to me, that's like real magic, is when you take the time away, is when you take the step back, when you really don't give in to that like urgency, but then like 5 clients come your way, or you meet the person of your dreams, or your baby manifests,
You're
so
like
I think
speaking
that
to my projector heart so much right now. I'm gonna like, I might have to like package this and like quote you on it. Sometimes slow is fast, because I think that is the magic that I want to try and like embody, and also inspire onto others.
Yeah, so just being, we can be surrounded by that, and just be more, it's more easeful when that's what you're seeing.
This also makes me laugh because I have a very, very high energy 5-year-old, and this is actually like a phrase we use in our house: slow is fast, as a reminder that, like,
oh my gosh,
you don't have to like, be like, okay, time to go. And he's like bouncing through the room and like throwing shoes around, and anyway, so yes, we love slow is fast.
I love that. I've never heard that before. I've never heard it said that way before. I do believe, what I've noticed in myself is that I take real pride in noticing now that actually I can be slow and actually be more efficient somehow.
yes,
Yeah, which is kind of mind blowing.
I mean, think about like being a 5-year-old, like trying to frantically zip up your coat, right? And you like can't line them up, and you're like going really fast. Like, yeah, clearly listeners could tell that I was moving my arms wildly because my bracelets were jangling like crazy. Like the faster he goes, the more he just gets everything stuck and tangled, and then is like annoyed, and like, but when he slows down, he can actually like line the zipper up and then pull it up, and it's all quicker. And if it's true for a 5-year-old, why isn't it true? Like, how can it not also be true for us?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I really love what you're saying, Emily, about like, surround yourself with the message that it's safe to slow down. Like,
yeah,
just like consume content that tells you it's an okay thing to do. It's just that's something that could be so simple to execute on,
Yeah.
And makes a really big difference.
Yeah. Can I interrupt again and just also say that I was laughing when you said that, Emily, because I didn't know it at the time, but I literally like I guess subconsciously I kind of knew, but I didn't know, like I think my subconscious knew, but I didn't consciously know that I chose my partner Adam because he moves slow. Like, I could not think of a better example of me. Literally, the person who I spend the most time with in my entire life is someone who moves at complete opposite like paces than me. So like, we've been friends for a long time before we dated. I just remember in college, I hated walking with him because he walked so freaking slow, and it would drive me crazy. And I'd always be like, right, like I don't know, 5-10 steps ahead of him and be like, come on, let's go. And he's just like, I can't walk any faster, because he just refuses. He's just like, nope. He's this big burly dude, and he just takes like these long, slow steps. And he calls me like a squirrel. So like, Like his animal is like, he's a bear. This is the thing. And he's very bear-like. And I asked him what he thought my like animal would be. And he said a squirrel. And I was very unflattered by that. But he's, because I'm over here like chipping away and going like, hey, let's go. And just such different, but it's totally changed. Like truly has had a huge impact on my life. Like I even like, I walk slower now. Like the effects of that are things that I could not have even imagined. Yeah.
It's reminding me, like, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother over the last 2 years, and I've lived with her for 2 summers over the last 10 years. And there's also something about being around older people or elderly. I mean, she passed, but she was 99, and it slowed me down because she wasn't in that urgency. I mean, she was also in the phase of her life for many years of like retirement and enjoyment and just like enjoying family. And there literally was no rush. She was in no rush. So I can totally relate on another way of just how like physically, yes, surround yourself virtually, but also physically being with people like that. If you find that you're kind of like a squirrel.
Yeah. It's also interesting because I'm also a very high energy person. And with my son, like I notice how much if I want to help him like get into his body, I have to get into my own body, right? If I want to help him feel comfortable slowing down. I mean, like I also love that he's a high energy kid, right? So it's not, but there are times where for a variety of reasons, it would be beneficial for him to slow down. And I have to be the one who is slow, right? I can't be like my hyper ADD self being like, just freaking slow. I mean, let's be real. It happens sometimes. At least once a day, but it is not actually that effective, as opposed to like when I can be the slow, it can help him, have access to it. So I'm just thinking about all the ways that we are modeling for each other. Yeah. I'm also to go back to your question, Eva, of like, what do you say to someone about slowing down?
I think there's more to unpack there. I feel like I feel like I jumped in, but I want to hear more from both of you.
We have a million tangents. That's what we do. So, but my answer will surprise nobody, which is to meet the resistance and the fear to slowing down. Right. So your question is like, what would you tell someone? What I would really do is and I do this often with clients is like, let's figure out like, why does slowing down feel dangerous? What feels so uncomfortable in the slowdown? And what do you need in order to feel safe slowing down? So rather than like kind of like logicking all the reasons why it's beneficial, like what is so scary? And there are things that are scary about it, right? So like, but what is your particular way of experiencing the discomfort of the slowdown? And then like, roll around in that.
Yeah. That makes complete sense.
I love that. And
it's like the answer I have for everything. What's the answer?
It's such a good answer for everything. And I love the word that you used, Kyley, like, how can I feel safe? Because sometimes we just look at like the fear and like that is what we're looking at, but like how can you allow yourself to feel safe in that slowdown or in that embracing your non-linear side?
And I will actually take clients through like almost like these guided journeys to meet the part of themselves who is in that moment like totally unavailable for the slowdown, right? That it's like most actively resistant. And they'll show up as like a soldier at the front of a castle, or they'll show up as like once it was this like little girl in a treehouse, but like set for battle, right? Like there's a lot of battle imagery that shows up again and again, but I will take people to these journeys, be like, let's meet the you who is in this moment unavailable for slowing down, because they have something to say. and what do they need? And so, I mean, that's a journey that I think anyone can do, right? Like put on whatever helps you get into kind of a meditative place. And then whether you do it through journaling or just visualization, like who's the you that shows up when you ask, like, okay, who's so afraid of slowing down? And see who shows up, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Usually it's just a part of us who hasn't felt safe before, so they don't know
Yeah.
safety, you know.
I don't know. I'm just so surprised. I think, interested in this idea of speed. Be- like this conversation is just very fascinating to me. And I didn't know that this was like a weird interest that I had, because I think, I mean, it makes sense because I think I'm very interested in time, but because I think I notice speed and slowness in contrast in myself. Like I'm naturally like I talk fast. I like, there's a part, and that's not wrong. I'm not making that wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
because something that I have talked about before is like nature is both slow and fast. Like if you look at to nature as the ultimate
Yeah.
model of rhythm, it all exists and it all belongs. And so there's a part of me that enjoys speed, and speed can be good. If you need to run away from danger, you better get the fuck out as soon as possible. But then for me, there's also such deliciousness. And like, I love going slow. Like I take my damn time doing things sometimes because I can't help it. I just need a lot of time. And yeah, the contrast is interesting. So like, sorry, I'm just thinking out loud right now. Like if I were to add to all the things that you have both said that I think are so helpful, is like also spend some time cultivating your relationship with both speed, like enjoying speed, but also going into your body and enjoying slowness. And remember how good that feels. Like the thing that you like doing and doing really slow, and how that actually is so safe, and it feels so, it literally just feels delicious. Like that's the word that I have for it. It's like, it's almost this like extravagant, lovely feeling. And it's like connect to that in your body and notice that that is safe as well.
Well, I'm also thinking about like, you know, the requirement isn't that you have to slow down 24/7, right? Like if slowing down doesn't feel accessible to you and you're trying to like, you know, tend to heal this relationship to rest, it's like, don't be a perfectionist about rest, right?
Right.
Where you're like, oh, you know, like maybe what's accessible to you is like, yeah, really slowly eating your like orange in the morning, you know, and like that's the thing. Or like, okay, I'm going to take 5 deep breaths every time I wash my hands, or like, you know, whatever, like what like singular moment of slowness can you give yourself, rather than it's this requirement that it's your new ethos.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's also, it's like what you mentioned, Eva, in that the fastness and the slowness have a place. And when we're coming at, you know, when we're specifically looking at like the business world and maybe like the online marketing world, or even like now the self-development and wellness world that's been very sped up and very made, like very commercialized in many ways, that doesn't mean that and the other word that we've used that I'll bring back in is like very, it's been made very masculine. That doesn't mean that the masculine doesn't have a place. The masculine absolutely has a place, and that's something, it's been interesting for me. I went from very masculine in business to very feminine in business, and now it's like, how do I integrate both? How do I have the structure and the discipline, and also the like flow and the intuition and the trust in this timing? So it's really like sitting with the situation and asking yourself, what is the medicine, or what is the like balance that I need here, which isn't always like 50-50. Like sometimes we want to lean more heavily, like if we are healing our relationship to rest or healing our relationship to our inner feminine, we want to lean more into that. But both sides of the polarity are necessary, especially when we come back to this like metaphor of birth, where the woman is very much centered, the birthing person is very much centered in birth. It's also something that requires a sperm. Like it's not just an egg. We need the sperm. We also need the womb, the space. And I think that our creations need both those things as well, the masculine and the feminine.
Yeah. I can very much relate to your story. And I see this a lot too, actually in the business world, funny enough, of being in this very intense, like masculine energy and then like overcompensating and then like going all the way into the other direction and then almost having a judgmental resistance to like, oh, well, all structure is bad now. All productivity is bad. Being productive is a bad word. And I think for me, and I'm still learning actually, because I think this can go very, 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 very deep. But I think I needed to, like with all things, like going into the deep end was helpful. I don't know if it was necessary, but it was helpful in helping me come back into sovereignty because then
Yes.
it showed me basically where I was like in yet another extreme. And
Well, it's like you traverse the whole terrain. And so you can say, oh, like actually, this is where I want to be.
Well, I'm also thinking about it, how like most of us have, I think, a pretty unhealthy relationship to like what we call order, but is actually control. Like we talk about our to-do list as if it's giving us structure, but it's like this like place for punishment and control. So eventually we break out of that space of control and we're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go over here with flow and intuition, and I would say chaos, and like I'm going to like play in that. And then I actually think it's less of a return, but more of a discovering of something new, right? Which is like, okay, now that I've actually played in flow and intuition and chaos, what does actual order in this instance feel like? What does actual structure that is nourishing feel like? Because I don't know that just as much as maybe I didn't know what flow is. And I think so. It shows up to me as less of a like return to center, but actually just discovering another new layer.
Yeah,
it's like a new dimension when you can integrate both sides.
Yeah.
And I would say for me, a dimension that I previously didn't have access to because I just didn't have the awareness that existed.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, that's cool. What else, Emily?
I'm curious to know, I'm just curious to know how you're viewing business in the light of being about to give birth, and like if you felt open to share. I'm just curious about what like how you, because with both of my kids I had a corporate job, right? So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do my maternity leave and then I'm gonna come back, and so it was pretty clear cut. And it seems so much in some ways more complicated because your business is also a baby, right? And so I'm curious to know what your emotions are there, and also like what you are in this moment feeling like you want in relationship to balancing motherhood and your business.
No, thank you for this question. And it's not surprising to me. This came up in a pregnancy circle that I'm a part of. It came up this week because it has been something very front of mind for me. I've always, since I left, but I would say even before I left my corporate job and started my business, I've always planned for the next thing. I had my job out of college when I was still like, I think I had my job before I even started my 4th year of college. Wow. I was studying for my CPA exam before I graduated college. I was starting to plan my business before I left my corporate job. So it's always been like this planning, not to say there's not moments of break, but that has been the biggest kind of like, it's kind of like a mind fuck, but not really. But it is a mind fuck for me. Is like, okay, how do I both plan for and also plan for this period of maternity leave and then after, and really continue to hold like the vision for my business while also knowing that everything could change. And so there's been a lot of feelings around that. And it was curious because I was speaking to two women in this group who both do have corporate jobs, and they said, yes, in some ways it is more clear cut for us, but those thoughts are still there. Those thoughts are still there. So I think what I'm choosing to lean into is, well, choosing to lean into the unknown. And also that I can plan, but if something needs to change, it can change. Yeah. Like I just started this new mastermind, which is a once a month meeting for spiritual women in business. And truly, it's very easeful for me. I'm facilitating a group. I'm not showing up and teaching. I'm not like, holding someone through a coaching container. So that felt like something that I can commit to, but even thinking about like the time of when we were going to hold calls was almost like an overly thought out process. And I've had to just come back to the place of like, I can make a decision now. And also I can't make the decision now with the information from the future. I don't have that yet. So yeah, there's like a lot of really practicing being in the present moment.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
And I think too, as far as, because you also asked about like how are you feeling with this business, because the business is, for me, it is a baby. It is something that I've poured a lot of my like creative energy and heart into. I do feel at this point it's like enough of a entity that I can not give it my full, it's like my first child. Yeah. It's more, maybe it's past the toddler phase, I don't know, but like it can go play by itself, and like I don't have to give it 100% attention. And I'm again choosing to have faith in that we'll come back together in a good way, and maybe it will do some cool things while I'm off on maternity leave. And part of me is really looking forward to like taking time off. It's terrifying. But I have a sense it'll be good.
Wow, that's really beautiful.
Yeah. I love this.
I have lots of questions. Oh, actually, I don't know. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Kyley, but I'm kind of curious if you have any like insight on that as someone who has two kids, and because I don't think you. Yeah, actually, timeline wise, I can't remember. You had Birdie before like the real like start of?
Yeah. I just knew I wanted to work for I was like always obsessed with working for myself. That was another thing that I like always had some idea about until it was the idea that stuck, but I started this actually while I was still on maternity leave with Birdie. So Birdie being my younger daughter, who will be 3 next week.
Wait, when's her birthday?
St. Patrick's Day.
Because my birthday is the 16th.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Happy almost
love
birthday.
A fellow Pisces,
Oh my
Pisces
gosh.
sister.
Yeah. She is so funny, and she's very cute because you say, Birdie, when's your birthday? And she goes, St. Patrick's Day. She has no idea what it is, but she's like, it's just the cutest. Anyways. So yeah. So what was I? So anyways, I didn't have, and so when I started doing this full time, she was, I can't do that math. Math is inaccessible. She was like a little over a year and a half, or a little under a year and a half. But yeah, so I don't have that experience, but the thing that I am receiving, as you've been talking about, like the different phases of our business kind of as children, is how I have been in the phase with my business of the intensity of small children that require all of your energy, right? And there's a moment, because my kids are now in this phase where you all of a sudden realize that they don't need you in the same way. And it's like, oh, I'm just standing here in the kitchen and you've been playing by yourself for 25 minutes. Like, whoa, you know? And so I'm actually like very recently realizing how much my kids are now like, it's not reliable. I can't tell them to go play by themselves, but I can like kind of trick them into playing by themselves. And then they'll do it for, you know, long periods of time. But like if I ask them to, then they're like, no, mom, let's play something, you know, whatever. But what you're gifting me is being able to apply that same metaphor to my business, because I'm also like very much in this moment building out legs of my business to exist more independently, so that they don't require the same kind of constant energy and attention. And it is scary and vulnerable, right? Like, I hope they're not sticking their fingers in the light socket up there. And also, it's unsustainable to be in that like all consuming stage, whether it's with your children or a business, because it just, you start to be so desperate for fresh air. So yeah, that's, I hadn't put those two to two, but now I'm thinking how interesting it is that both my parenting and my business are actually in the same evolution. And that also feels really vulnerable, because it's like, oh, well, if nobody needs me, I get to have,
now you have all this space.
and like, what do I do with it? That's actually like, there was a moment the other day where like I was entertained. There was nothing urgent to do for work. And I was like, what do I do for fun? You know, like I had to like really sit for a moment and think like, the answer here isn't to do more work. That isn't needed in this moment. The kids are fine. And eventually I picked up a book, but it was really interesting to observe how foreign that experience has been over the past 2 years, that I had to really like sit and run through a list of things I could do for fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a really cool like moment to be in. Like, I haven't been in that with children yet, obviously, but I've heard about it. And I feel like those moments also exist within business, where whether it is that you were like building out a program, or even just something small, is like you were not small, but like shorter timeline is launching a program, all of your energy goes into it. And then you have to shift and like running it. And then you shift into like, oh, well, I'm not actually, all these people graduated or they completed their packages with me. And there's all these different cycles that our businesses take on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to something we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, like the death that happens in birth, like what are we invited to let go of in any new cycle, right? Because I could still be like, and I caught myself today being like in the weeds in a way that wasn't required of me, right? Like I was like fiddling with some like link in a document, like you know, like I have an amazing team who can do these things for me, right? And yet I was doing it in a way that was like, just stop, Caldwell. You know, like allow for the space. And so like, so to me, that's the death of like, this isn't required of you. And are you willing to let this you die so you can step into this new iteration? Which to me is like, that's the constant
Evolution.
Yeah.
I love this. All right.
I've also felt just not like kind of continuing on this, is that, and something I think we've alluded to a few times, is this like a streamlining that can happen in a business. Like many people that become entrepreneurs, I think, identify as multi-hyphenates or multi-passionates. But more and more in our information age, it is important for us to like streamline or hone in on what is our unique gift, what is our unique gift or our unique offering or our unique service right now. And something I noticed this week in particular was a group coaching program that I've been running for the last 2 years was coming to an end. And it did just signify, again, another, like literally the mastermind started this week. And then this program ended after 2 years. And the day that we had our last call, I was having lots of feels. And I realized that there was grief there, and there was like something that needed to be processed. And I think there's like just a lot more of that as I step more closely to this birth portal of my literal baby. In like really giving myself space, and maybe sharing this for anyone else who is doing the same or leaving one 20-year career to start something new, is to allow space for the emotional processing in that is happening, and that we don't just have to jump into that next thing. I think that's like the interesting thing for me of this time, is that it's not just jumping into the next. It's like a moment of pause. And one of my go ahead.
Just briefly, if we don't take the pause, the emotions come with us through the portal, right?
Yes.
If we don't honor them and witness them and let them have their moment, then they just like hitch a ride until they get their moment.
Yeah. Well, and I've been reading more too, like about postpartum and how to like honor that time, and really from like more traditional perspectives, what cultures did to re-nourish the mother during that time. And the biggest takeaway for me is like that, again, the importance of rest, the importance of not trying to fill the space, of letting that new you, like Kyley, you mentioned having to figure out who this me is as a parent, who this me is as a parent of two, letting that new you integrate, and connecting to what we talked about like fast is slow or fast can be efficient. When we give ourselves that space, like that adequate space, oftentimes then we can come out of the portal or come out of the transformation more whole or more healed or more ready to take on what's next. Instead of depleted.
This is making a lot of sense for me in terms of like, I just really like this analogy, because there really are so many like connections that you could be making. And part of what I am taking away is also like, I don't like, to me, birthing a baby seems like this really beautiful, sacred process that I would want to honor. And I don't know if I always give my business that same grace. I feel like sometimes I treat it with just a little bit more of like a tactical mindset. Not always, but the language that, you're sharing with us, Emily, is very much like, oh, I can almost like zoom back and see the bigger picture, that like, I guess I can get hyper focused on like the project that's right in front of me. And I'm seeing like, oh, I can zoom out and see this is really like the long game. Like there's this whole lifespan of my business that I can like be taking into consideration. So like there's this bigger macro view, but even a micro view, like what just dropped in for me is like, I was like, oh, so in Chinese culture, after you give birth, there's this phase called like where you 坐月子, which is, to me, like sounds like the way that I think every woman should like give birth, is that the month after you give birth, people are supposed to like wait on you hand and foot, and just like a goddess, and you're just supposed to like, people cook these like nourishing foods for you, and you're not like, the mother isn't really supposed to do anything. Like you just get and I guess, you can do what you want. If you want to go out for a walk, this isn't like you're in prison, but this culture of really like, everyone knows, it's all agreed upon. Like the community surrounds itself around the mother, and everything is about like your replenishment, to be replenished. And I was thinking, no wonder I'm so tired after a lunch. Like it is true. Like after a lunch, like I always go into this like rest phase. Like even whether I want to or not, but it just happens. My body's just like, nope, I just need to like, I can't force myself to do something even if I wanted to. And sometimes I have judgment about that. And I'm like, why do I keep receding back in? And I'm like, oh, well, this makes sense to me. And I just like birthed this thing. And now my body just wants to rest instead of going. And again, having the model of birth, like to a child, allows me to have that same grace then for my business cycles. Yeah. And it's like
the
giving, it's
book that
permission
I'm
giving.
reading. Yeah, the book that I'm reading about postpartum, or one of the books I'm reading about postpartum, is called The First 40 Days. Kyley, have you read this?
Yeah, it didn't exist when Desi was born, and so I bought it when I was pregnant with Birdie, but I had a 2-year-old, so I didn't read it.
Oh yeah. Well,
but it's so beautiful.
It's so beautiful, and it's written by a Chinese American, and her experience with her, I think it's her auntie coming over and like doing that confinement period with her. And same, when I've been reading this, I'm like, this seems like this is what it should, not to like put a should on it, but this is what it should be. And I love what you brought up, Eva, because I too know after a launch or after a website rehaul, there's like this exhaustion. And oftentimes, especially with like a program launch, you go right into executing or delivering the program, which maybe can be said to like taking care of a child, but really honoring that space of integration, of healing, of your own rebirth as, okay, now I have this new website, or now I have this new program, or I thought I was going to have this new program and nobody signed up, so I have to grieve that. There really just are. That's why I love this metaphor, is there are so many different ways we can get in it.
Yeah. I also love, like, I started, I don't know, maybe a little over a year ago, I started putting a week between like a launch closing, or sometimes even 2 weeks, like the launch closing and the event starting. And because I used to just be like, okay, like doors closed at midnight the night before we begin. And then I was so exhausted. And it wasn't, so the new program that I'm launching is like an open cohort program. So it's a little bit of a different structure. It's like, 5 to 10 folks sign up each month. And so anyway, it didn't even occur to me that I hadn't given myself any and hadn't given myself that week in between. And so just today I was like, oh, fuck it, I'm going to change the start date, right? Like, it's my business. I get to do that. Like, and it felt really beautiful to witness how uncomplicated it was for me to just be like, oh, we're starting a week later, everybody. Love you, because I know I can't show up the way I want to if I don't give myself that like moment of pause. So yeah, I think
that. Yeah. And I think that speaks to real growth, because I think for a lot of people, there's this idea of like, I can't do that. Oh no, like story people are depending on me, or this idea that it's actually much more dire than it really is.
You're right. And like, people will be disappointed and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, people get to have whatever their reaction is. And also like my commitment, like I have to be in integrity, right? I have to be able to show up as like my best self. And if my best self isn't available, it's not actually an integrity to like push through it. That's not actually being of service.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely real growth, because Kyley 3 years ago did not have that available.
All right. Emily, is there anything else on your mind? I mean, in relation to business as birth, or just birth, or anything else?
Yeah, there's one other obvious piece of this that we haven't really spoken to, that has been a huge part of my experience. Again, my experience with this literal pregnancy, and I'm also seeing how it very much ties to business, and that is the topic of support and surrounding ourselves, asking for and allowing to receive. And again, funny because it connects back to, what did I say I'm learning right now? Support. I went into, we're pursuing a home birth. And so we have midwives, we have a doula. Great. Had that all set up. And a few weeks ago, I found myself in this space where I was like, holy shit, I am not supported enough. I thought I was, because I had the like medical team there, and doula is not technically medical, but I had the like bit core structure there. I have my partner, I have friends and family, And I realized this was something I've never done before. And there was like a whole nother level of support that I needed. And that's when I signed up for the yoga pregnancy circle and also got myself back in therapy. And it was just like a beautiful reminder too, when it comes to business. If you are birthing your first business, if you're putting yourself out there in a totally new way, or you're trying to do something that, even if it feels innate in you and it feels like something that you must do or that you know how to do, the the value and the importance of support is, it's priceless. And it's so important. And I want to encourage, just like I gave myself permission to like go overboard, like be luxurious in your support, do more than you think you need. I want to offer that to folks who are in a transformation or a rebirth phase of their work, because it doesn't have to be, it can be challenging in so many ways, but it doesn't have to be like a struggle that you're in alone. And you won't need that support forever. Like, that's not the point. I think that all of us do transformational work, and the point is not for you to like work with Sally for the rest of her life. It's you're in it with her or him or them for that period. And yeah, so that was just the one that's something that's been on my mind, and I'm curious how you all have seen that, Kyley, either for like your literal births, but also both of you in like these transformational periods of business. Do you find yourself like amping up that support team?
Well, what I love about what you're saying, yes, for sure. And
wait, sorry, can I interrupt for a second? And just because I want to like spend some quality time there, but I feel like there's a pre-question that I should ask in terms of like timing order. Like, I was actually wondering, and then because I really, sorry, this is like a weird interruption, but I actually really wanted you to go backwards a little bit. And could you speak to, in your like personal birth, like baby birth, how you knew you weren't being supported, like that you needed more support? Like, what was that? What was that moment when you were like, oh, but like I have all the things,
Yes.
and then how? Because sometimes I think it's hard to know that we need more support.
Yeah, that is such a good question. I'm so glad you brought that up. One, I was like looking to my partner for things that he can't nor should he be able to give me, like kind of putting too much pressure on him. And same thing with friends. And that I also noticed that for a lot of again, folks that I've worked with who are in this birth stage of their business, is they want their partner, they want their best friend to be their cheerleader and the person that like carries them through. And that's just usually not the case. So I noticed that I was putting a lot of pressure, maybe not externally, but I was like making up these expectations of him. And I just felt like I didn't have the people, the right people to turn to for the things that I was questioning or that were coming up for me. And I have very supportive family, friends, but it was
you
so
had like
helpful then
questions
just to like,
that weren't getting answered.
Connect with other moms who were pregnant, like within the same few weeks as me, and to be able to like connect on a regular basis, or connect with a therapist who specifically works with somebody who in prenatal but also postpartum.
Got it. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It was like a noticing of like almost like questions and desires maybe that weren't getting met. And
that wasn't like a thing of like communication. It was just like, no, you're going to the wrong person for this.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for answering that. And then to jump back to your original question, Kyley, sorry, I know I cut you off. You were talking about like, what is our relationship with support, and how has that showed up in your life?
Yeah. And the thing that I was going to say was, I really just love what I'm observing in your story is like the way we fixate on the outcome, which is like the birth and the labor, right? Like I love all the reading that you're doing, because I remember when I was pregnant with Desi, I just wrote a bunch of books about childbirth. Like I knew so much about childbirth and then like nothing else, right? But I think in business, the version of that also is like, say, like a launch, right? Like, okay, do I have my launch plan? Do I have my website designer? Do I have my emails written? Do I have these tactical things for this specific moment in time in which like the birth and the labor happens? And what I love in your story is the zooming out to recognize that like there is a tremendous amount of support to build you up to that moment and to carry you on the other side of that moment,
to carry you through it. Yeah.
And that is the part that I kind of have goosebumps. That's the part that we overlook, that we think isn't important, or that we think like is a luxury, and like, oh, maybe I could have a little bit of that, but like, or if the launch goes well, then I'll invest in a healer, like whatever the thing is, right? We put that surrounding support lower on the totem pole, or lower, I shouldn't use that expression, but like lower on the priority list. And yet that is often actually the support that we need more than anything else. So I love that you're giving us that.
Yeah. And what would you say, Kyley, about your relationship with support?
Yeah, I mean, I love what you're saying about like so I also love in particular the surrounding support. That's my jam. That's like where I have found the tactical places shift when I give myself that like emotional support. And so I really at this point feel like I have a really lovely well to go to for that, and a lot of it is friends who are also in the same space as me. And so I'm like, okay, something's coming up, like I'm gonna like tap this friend, or I'm gonna do an energetic trade with a friend, or whatever the case may be. And so I definitely feel like that support is essential. And I'm also wondering in this moment about my own kind of ebb and flow of allowing myself rest, or allowing myself. So that was an interesting Freudian slip where I said rest instead of support. But I think actually, to my point of like being in the stage of business where maybe I let my business, play by itself for a little while. I think it's the support that allows me to rest and not be either fixing and healing, or like in the weeds of my business. But like, I have the team, we've already written the post, I don't have to like go in there and fiddle every little detail. Like I can just let it run and read my book. And I think that's the kind of support that's my edge right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about you, Eva?
It's interesting. I'm noticing like myself just having all these different responses to this idea of support, because support comes in so many different forms. And I have had support throughout my whole life. I think like friends is a really important piece. Like even this podcast is a form of meaning, like kind of like what you're saying at some point earlier, you're talking about Emily, like, some relationships falling away, but like building new ones, like making connections with your people. Like what you needed was like your people who are in the same phase as you in your pregnancy. And that's really helpful. And that's why Kyley and I started this podcast, so that we could have that shared connection. I don't know. I think it's strange. I'm actually surprised by the dissonance that I feel within myself, because when I think of like the best support I have had in my life that I've like hired, it's been like my spiritual teachers that have truly transformed my life.
Yeah.
But I've had some pretty bad experiences with business, like coaching support. And I think, and I know, I guess it's really, I guess what I'm speaking to is like finding the right support. And I think with business specifically, what I see with a lot of people is that you're like, you start and you're like so desperate. It's like I ask people to ask who and or what in you is seeking out this person's support, because then you can like, I think we all know them. Everyone I know so many people who their first business coach that they hired was just like, oh God, that was just like a disaster. And like, they took all my money and it was like a mess. Not everyone's had that experience, but it's just too many to count for me at this point who have unfortunately had that experience. And you two are both help women in their business. So like, I'm sure you have thoughts and feelings on that. Anyway, you kind of get, so I guess what I'm trying to say is like, there's healthy support and unhealthy support. And I think if we're talking specifically about business right now, it's also just really important that you find someone who can really support you in that nourishing way that I've been able to get from spiritual mentors, but maybe not necessarily. But yeah. So yeah, I'll just end there and see what you two have to say.
I have a confession to make.
Ooh, confession time.
I've never worked with a straight up business coach.
Oh yeah.
And it's interesting because even this week I was thinking about it, and you know, they say like, oh, you need to invest in your industry. You need to like I've heard it said, and I also do feel like it is valuable to work with a coach if you're a coach, because then you see the value. But ever since day one of my business, I have had some sort of spiritual mentor, teacher. And yeah, I just think that's interesting. And because I also know a lot of people who have done that, who've put out the big dollars for a business coach. And not to say, again, there are lots of people who have had positive transformational experiences. But it's curious too, to be in this position of being a business career coach, when a lot of my deepest work too has come from the spiritual side, which is probably why everything that I do also is informed by spirit and those teachings.
I mean, I completely agree. And I think I'm laughing about how, like, to me, there's a difference between programs that offer you steps and a solution and like the formula thing we were talking about before, and spaces that are held for your transformation.
Yes. And
to me, in my experience and what I've observed, if you're not signing up for something that is transformational, right? If you're looking for a fix and a solution and a set of steps, you will feel like you failed because it will disappoint you, and you will internalize that and think it's your fault, as opposed to the fact that like those probably just weren't your freaking steps, right? Or there wasn't space for the emotional transformation that needed to happen in order for you to execute on the steps, right? I had a call with a woman literally today who was like, I invested in this marketing program and it was great. And also it was all over my head because I had all these stories of like, I can't do that yet. I can't do that yet. I can't do that yet. Right. She wasn't able yet to embody the person who executed on that plan. So to me, I think let everything be transformational. And so sign up for the things that are going to, like, I don't know, change everything rather than the ones that are going to fix shit.
Yes.
Quote unquote.
Yeah.
Let's make that like a bumper sticker.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's really well said. But I will say that, like, I mean, of course it's the spiritual, because like no surprise that both of you help women with their businesses, but really what you're talking about is spirituality, right? Like I know that about the both of you, like you're working in the context of supporting women in this way, but really you're doing the spiritual shit, right? And that's why.
Literally, I was talking to a client yesterday and I was like, so this is going to seem like I thought a left field, but can we talk about like an action step for a minute? Like, right. Like and we both laughed, right? Because like, you know, I mean, I would say my one-on-one coaching is like exclusively it's really spiritual coaching
Mm-hmm.
for people who are business owners, right? It's not even, if you are someone who wants someone to lay out the steps for you, I won't be a good fit for you. I'll just say that way. So, yeah.
But I also think what I think is tricky is I have actually seen people out there. Yeah, it's just complicated. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I even want to say this.
Who've had good experiences with the, like, you know, Amy Porterfield, Marie Forleo approach?
No, I was actually going to say like I think there are people out there who present themselves as spiritual, like they're helping women with business and they're presenting themselves as like this, they do the spiritual stuff, but they're still stuck in the bro marketing.
Oh, yes.
You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
Oh, it seems like someone who might be looking for spiritual support might be like, okay, yeah, that this person's going to help me with like the spiritual element of it. But you get into the program and it actually turns out just to be the same shit that the business,
it's bro marketing with manifestation.
Yeah. Yes.
Bro marketing with law of attraction, like on top of it.
Yes. Thank you. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. And so it's, I don't know. I think, my advice is, I do know my advice. My advice is like to just do your best to work with the person who speaks to your body and soul, even if it doesn't make logical sense. Like, that's all I can say. And you still might have to, like, maybe you'll still like make a mistake. I don't know. And maybe that'll be a good learning experience for you.
I think we all have to go through that. And I echo everything that you said, Eva, about like, go with your body, go with your gut, go with your intuition. Who are you feeling drawn to, even if it doesn't make the like logical sense up here, or if their program outline doesn't exactly match what you think you need. Mm-hmm. And also part of the process, especially in business, is not every investment pans out. Mm-hmm. And accepting that is like, just not like every creative idea doesn't come through and become like your signature program or your most aligned and abundant offer. Is we do still have, we make these, maybe not, I don't want to call it mistakes, but we have to go down one path to be like, oh no, that isn't for me. And for some people it's $100 path, and some people it's $100,000 path.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really good point, that like, it's interesting. I've even been having a conversation. I think everyone's doing their taxes. I've had a number of conversations with people being like, I've invested, like there's like a level of concern or embarrassment about how much they invested in their business, right? I heard something the other day was like, my business isn't profitable yet. And I was like, your business is less than a year old. No one's business is profitable and under a year, right? Like, that's
some
the
of
anomaly.
The biggest businesses out there are not profitable. I think like
Twitter
Netflix
wasn't profitable for like 15 years.
Yeah, and they're still going.
Yeah. So, but like the investment carries this connotation of like of debt, and like that was a risk and a gamble, and it has to pay off immediately, or I've made a mistake and I'm bad and I can't have the thing that I want, as opposed to business runs off of investment. Like that is a standard way to run business. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be your model, but like there's no shame in investing in your business, and there's no shame in an investment not panning out exactly the way you wanted it to. It doesn't mean that you made a mistake. It doesn't mean that you're bad. It doesn't mean that you're unworthy of the thing that you want. It means like there was a lesson there for you, and now you're moving on to the next iteration of your existence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And sometimes you don't see the like fruits or the dividends from that investment. Like, let's go real, like zoom back and think about like the stock market. Number one rule of like investing, I mean, if you're not like an investor, is just put your money in, keep putting some money in, and like you will grow returns. And that doesn't always, I don't want to say just put money into your business, but if you put energy and in time and you invest things in it, you might not be able to analyze the portfolio and be like, oh yeah, that specific healer that I saw unlocked all these things. And then now I have this. But I love that reminder, Kyley, that it's not failure if it doesn't pan out right away.
Yeah.
Who knows what's working behind the scenes?
Totally. Oh, I think that's such an important point, which then I think is a callback to also time and allowing things to take time, and your baby baking process takes time, because I think like it took me a long time before I was making money in my business. And I think that's not a lot, I think there's this idea of like glamorized business of like, oh yeah, you're going to start doing this and making $1 million because you see the people out
6 figures in 6 months.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that can be like really,
I'll get you to 10K months in 30 days.
Exactly. All
which is
all
not
of
even
that.
a month.
Exactly. Exactly. All of that. And that's like, not to say that can happen, but also if it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean that you're a failure and that somehow you're fucked and you're doing it wrong. And that, you don't need to internalize that to mean that it's like never going to happen for you. But it's actually, again, slow is fast. If you can like allow yourself to give yourself permission to take time, and that it not put all this pressure on yourself and your business, that slow can become fast. All right, Emily, I have to pee so bad, Emily. I don't know how you're doing it.
There's like some magical portal that like I enter into when I'm in like, again, in pure like generator form. That I enter in, especially when I'm in really engaging and exciting conversations. But I'll probably have to pee 3 times after we get off.
Yeah. Well, should we do a round of joy?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think
you want to go first, Emily? What's something bringing you joy right now?
Sure. Okay, so I have 2 things. Well, there's a lot of things, but 2 specific things. One is feeling my baby move inside of me. It is every time it's like, wow, it just is like a snap back into, this is such a miracle. Like life is such a miracle. And so I love to feel him move. And the other thing is very literal or like tangible. And that is, I found these really awesome gluten and dairy free, which I'm not completely gluten and dairy free, but I found these really awesome gluten and dairy free cookies and cream ice cream pops, which has been a really random pregnancy craving, like good cookies and cream ice cream.
Wait, can I ask what the brand is? Because I don't do great with dairy, but I love ice cream.
I can do like cheese, but I can't do ice cream. Like ice cream just kind of messes with me. I don't know if it's the sugar. I will look it up and send it to you because I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it's called Good Pops.
Okay, cool. Noted. And also awesome.
So good.
I love both of these so much.
I love that as a joy.
Yeah. And also like, there's nothing as delightful as the exact right food when you're pregnant. Like that is the peak human food experience.
I do feel bad. One of my friends, she says she loses her appetite and her taste when pregnant. And so I post pictures of food and she's like, I'm living vicariously through you because I'm over here with like the appetite of a linebacker, just eating all the things.
Yeah. I have this one really distinct memory of picking up my husband from work. He had like a half day, and picking him up from like the train and being super hungry, but like waiting for us to have lunch together. And he had lunch, like normally no big deal, but I was a hungry pregnant lady and I literally started crying in the car. I was like, but I needed lunch. It was gonna be our day. And then he was like, I think you're really hungry. Why do it? I was like, I know I am. And we went to this, I still remember we went to this like seafood shack, and I got what was the greatest cup of clam chowder in all of existence because I was this starving pregnant lady who wanted, and also was for some reason craving clam chowder. So So yeah. I'm glad you found the great ice cream pops because I love this.
I love that story.
How about you, Eva?
Okay, well, I have one thing off the top of my head, and then I'm gonna like sit on this question for a little bit longer. But I will say, I started putting like coconut fat back into my morning beverage, and I think people on this podcast know enough. I'm like obsessed with my morning drink. I have all these different variations of what I do, but it's like such a source of joy for me. And I don't know if you guys know, but like sometimes people talk about putting ghee or coconut oil or even butter into your coffee or your tea or blah, blah. And I like did that for a while. And I don't remember why I stopped, but I did it again in Taiwan. Oh my God, it's so freaking good. Like coconut oil. And I don't know what kind of coconut oil my parents have, but like the taste of coconut is so rich. So I drink it with like this tea, this whole complicated tea thing that I do. And Kyley, you and I have both raved about our love for foam. And so I do this whole like foaming thing with my milk. And it is like out of this world, just how freaking delicious it is. And I don't know, I also feel compelled to, while I'm here in Taiwan, to continue to say good things about Taiwan. But the truth is I don't have a singular thing. I just know that like, it's all the senses of being in Taiwan. I think I feel so much joy every day being here. Like literally I will just like look outside and be able to see, like it is a sensory, it's a body experience. I'm just like soaking up this body through my senses and my sights, and I feel joy just being here, which again, I feel like I've been saying that for the past couple of podcast episodes, which really is like making me wonder like, what does this mean? Like this can't just be a temporary thing for me. It's like it's just the idea is percolating. So anyway, yeah, that's where I am.
I love this. Yeah, we're here for the unfolding.
Yeah. And Kyley, what about you? What's something that's bringing you joy this week?
Okay, this is an anti-joy. It's an update on a previous joy, which is that my milk frother has stopped heating the milk.
No,
so I know
tragedy.
It's like not even 2 months old, and I had this whole share about how much joy I was making all these cafe au laits, and now it doesn't heat. I will still froth the milk, but it won't heat it up. So now I have this even more ridiculous routine where I'm heating up milk in the microwave and then putting it, because now I'm like married. Now I like love this routine, right? Yep. So I'm like, no, I want my I don't want just coffee with regular milk. Like it's got to have some. Anyway, it's a whole ridiculous.
Oh, I feel you, girl. I'm right there with you.
Thank you.
But that sucks. And can I ask? I don't know why these things matter.
It's the Pot brand.
So okay, that's what I was going to ask you. What brand is it? I'm mad at that brand.
And I was like, Instant Pot's good and real. No, do not. Stay away.
Noted.
I will report back because I'm buying another one. But
okay, get another one.
So that's my anti-joy. But it's actually kind of, I don't know, for some reason I'm amused by the whole unfolding of it. So yeah. But my joy, I just had it and it floated away. What was I gonna say?
It's okay.
My goodness.
You could take a pause and we can ask Jennifer to.
Yeah, give me a pause for a second because okay. All right, Jennifer, we're back. So one of the things I have these afternoons with the kids where I kind of like lose steam with activities to do. So for context, Emily, I have childcare some of the time, and then I am with my kids. My husband has pointed out to me, he's like, you're still working 40 hours a week. You just do it in like the evenings and, in funny hours, which is a helpful reminder. But anyway, so I have a ton of time with the kids, which I love. And sometimes in the afternoons I lose steam and I'm like, I don't know what to do with you guys. Right? Like I'd like for us to do something fun, and also like I don't have any ideas and I don't want to play like hide and seek for another 2 hours. So I was at Michael's and they had these like arts and crafts kits, and they were like buy one get one half off. So I bought a bunch of these different arts and crafts kits. So like today we made like kaleidoscopes. And it was super fun. And they had like stickers, and we built the whole like inside contraption. And then like it's really funny because then they thought we were building pirate spyglasses. So when inside it was the kaleidoscope, my daughter started to cry. And so So after like the whole kit and like 45 minutes of building it, I actually had to deconstruct it, and now she basically has a paper towel roll with stickers on it.
She's like, I love this so much more. That is hilarious.
Yeah, she was like so mad, and I tried to. I was like, "Well, just look. There's all these pretty colors." She's like, "I don't want to look."
I feel like that stereotypical kid. You're like, this is the fancy thing. I just want to play with the cardboard box.
Yeah, the simple thing. Yeah,
exactly. So, but then even later today, my son like was like it was like found a way to like change out the beads and the kaleidoscope thing. Anyway, so I'm gonna go like try to find more of these arts and crafts kits, because
that's
great.
Cool.
And then I don't have to like create and come up with an activity. It's just take it out of the box, and then we all have fun for 45
And also
minutes.
Arts and crafts is cool. Like that's one of those things that as an adult,
yeah.
I was like, I wish I appreciated that more. I mean, I loved it as a kid, but I'm like, that was so fun. And also
this is funny, and you'll observe this, Emily, like the way in which my husband, there's certain things that he does really well that I do not enjoy, and there's other things that I love. So he finds like art time to be very, he's like, it's just a mess. It's like, he's like, it's not fun for him. But I'm like, yes, that's like, it's one of my favorite things. Whereas my husband's really, really great at like imagination games. And I'm like, I don't know what the octopus has to say. So yeah, arts and crafts is like my domain. So I'm excited to, I feel like I'm like upping the game for all of us. So
good. That's awesome. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, cool.
Emily, where can people find you?
People can find me. Central Hub will be my website, which is emilynachazel.com, which I'm sure y'all can link. I am active on Instagram and YouTube, and those things will be linked on my site, or I can also send you guys that information as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. Was there anything in particular that you wanted to share? Well, actually, this podcast is coming out in a couple of weeks, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, I think. Was there anything in particular you wanted to highlight right now?
Yeah, I think that two things, depending on the time when folks end up listening to this. One, I do have this mastermind for spiritual women in business. So if you like this conversation and some of the things that we were talking about here today, I think that it would probably be a really good fit for you. There's a few different meeting times, but we meet once a month. And then there's a community chat space where we can connect in between calls. So that's something that I will be offering ongoing. And until I go on maternity leave, and then after I go on maternity leave, I do have something called a career clarity session, which if you are in that point of feeling kind of foggy, or maybe in that place of rebirth or transformation, in this session, we look at both your astrology, your human design, and then of course your unique circumstances to gain clarity and also map out a plan forward for you.
I love that. That sounds super helpful. I could have used it at one point.
Yeah.
It's like why I created it. Like, here you go, younger self.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, amazing. All right.
Yay. Thanks so much, Emily.
So much.
Yeah, this was really great.
Thank you both for having me. This was like so fun. I think I'm going to sleep really, really well tonight.
Okay. All right.